I'm ready when you're ready. Say, Rizza, I'm ready. I'm just telling you, I've been ready for a while. Assalamu alaikum jami'an. Welcome to Imam Hussein Islamic Center. We've got a lovely evening today, the first Friday after the month of Ramadan, and Sheikh Mohammed today will be talking about the Shaytan. So we've got a very inspiring and interesting lecture coming up. But before we start the program, as always, please welcome Brother Murtaza Sabri with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad with the recitation of the Quran. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, I'm reciting from Surah Al-Kahf, verse 30, with your loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا. إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا. أولئك لهم جنات أولئك
جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس واستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب نعم الثواب وحسنت مرتفقا اضرب لهم مثلا رجلين جعلنا جنتين من أعناب وحففناهما بنخل وجعلنا بينهما زرعا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. على حب الزهرة صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, for the next time, if you have the opportunity to look at the Mus'haf, should be good, with another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Last night I had recitation in another center. I mentioned there that some of my friends, some of the reciters, when they're reciting Surah Al-Kawthar, for the barakah, they're looking at the Mus'haf. Inshallah, I'm doing that one with another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول وآله الأطهار على رسول.
MashaAllah. God protect you, Brother Murtaza, and protect that beautiful voice. Can we recite 3 loud salawat for the protection of this beautiful brother? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What a beautiful gift, brother. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'm sure Brother Murtaza will tell you a lot of practice and hard work goes into that to be able to recite the Quran like that. God protect you, brother. Today's program, inshallah, is a happy program, even though we're going to talk about the Shaytan. But inshallah, Sheikh Mohammed has told me it's a happy occasion. So even though we're getting to know the Shaytan a little bit better. Today's program, we're going to have a cahoots at the end of it. So if your phones are not charged, please make sure you charge them. We're going to have a cahoots, and there's lots of beautiful prizes to give out as part of Eid al-Fitr. So the Eid is continuing at Imam Hussein Islamic Center, inshallah. We have some poetry, some anashid, and we'll finish off with cahoots. Can I just ask the brothers to please come forward just a little bit, because there'll be more people joining our program, so we don't want, if we can just move forward a little bit. And please welcome with a loud salawat for some poetry, Sister Sabir Alawi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sit down or stand up?
Eid, the most wonderful time of the year. Eid, the most wonderful word to hear. Family and friends together making memories. A celebration to continue for centuries. Waking up for Eid Salah early, feeling your best surely. Kids waiting for money and gift. Parents wishing they didn't insist. An opportunity to practice self-resistance, thinking before every complaint. I take my time to thank Allah for blessing me with this holy month and letting me seek forgiveness on the night of God. I thank Him for my mum and dad. I thank Him for my loved ones around me. And I thank Him for this house of Imam Hussein. We work towards a world where we'll never bow in shame. Salawat.
Bill, that was a very beautiful poem, and she wrote that all by herself. And do you know how much courage it takes, someone like that, to get up on stage and recite something in front of everybody? Thank you, Sabila. Can we protect her with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Many great talents, alhamdulillah, are developed at the beautiful house of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now for some more poetry and anashid, Brother Ali Wa'ali, can we welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Allahumma salli ala.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أيامكم سعيدة سعيدة سعيدة، يلعدكم عقيدة عقيدة عقيدة. أيامكم سعيدة سعيدة سعيدة، يلعدكم عقيدة عقيدة عقيدة. بالهادي اهتدينا، بالعتر اقتدينا، بالهادي اهتدينا، بالعتر اقتدينا. أيامكم سعيدة، كل عام سعيدة. أيام الموالين، أيام الموالين. صل يا ربنا على أحمد والميامين. أحمد برسول الله لكم أسوة في المضامين، أسوة في بعده يأتي حيدر هو خير الوصين، هو خير بالبار ونبيه ونبيه ونبيه، وبحيدر وصية وصية وصية. بالبار ونبيه نبيه all together. وبحيدر وصية وصية. آمنا ورضينا بالعتر اقتدينا، آمنا ورضينا بالعتر اقتدينا. أيامكم سعيدة، أيامكم سعيدة سعيدة سعيدة، يلعدكم عقيدة 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 أيامكم louder louder يلعدكم عقيدة عقيدة بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا أيامكم سعيدة فاطم بعد حيدر هي للكون أنوار هي قد حباها رب العلا بمعاني وأسرار بمعاني هي شمس والمجتبى قمر وابن أقمار قمر وحسين من بعده طود عز وإيثار طود ها يطهر سلالة 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 من بيت الرسالة رسالة رسالة ها يطهر سلالة من بيت الرسالة louder louder هالصف واكتفينا بالعترة اقتدينا هالصف واكتفينا بالعترة أيامكم سعيدة أيامكم سعيدة 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 يلعدكم عقيدة 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 أيامكم سعيدة سعيدة يلعدكم عقيدة 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 بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا أيامكم سعيدة خمسة هم أهل العبا بعدهم 9 آيات بعدهم قد أضاء الله بهم ملكوت السماوات ملكوت سيد الساجدين ذا قدوة في العبادات قدوة في باقر العلم نجله موضوع للكرامات موضوع بالصادق أملنا 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 بالصادق أملنا 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 يتصدق عملنا 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 بالصادق أملنا أملنا يتصدق عملنا louder للكاظم هو أنا بالعترة اقتدينا للكاظم هو أنا بالعترة اقتدينا أيامكم سعيدة أيامكم سعيدة 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 يلعدكم عقيدة أيامكم سعيدة يلعدكم عقيدة 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 بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا إذا والرضا أنعم بالرضا من إمام وسلطان من إمام والجواد محمد شمس نور وعرفان شمس نور وعلي الهادي له في در الحق برهان كم أضاءت بالعسكر من قلوب وآذان من قلوب بالمهدي سندنا 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 وبعدنا يتحقق وعدنا وعدنا بالمهدي سندنا سندنا وبعدنا يتحقق وعدنا وعدنا للمهدي انتمينا بالعترة اقتدينا بالمهدي انتمينا بالعترة اقتدينا أيامكم سعيدة أيامكم سعيدة 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 يلعدكم عقيدة 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 أيام all together يلعدكم عقيدة عقيدة بعد بالهادي اهتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا بالعترة اقتدينا أيامكم سعيدة. فلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. I'm going to read this nasheed in English, and I want you to guys to say this phrase after me. Salamu alayka ya Imam. Okay, let's start. First Imam is Ali, famous for his bravery. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The second Imam is Hassan. He is the Prophet's first grandson. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The third Imam is Hussein. Forever we will call his name. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The fourth Imam is Sajjad. He would bow down and pray so hard. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The fifth Imam is Baqir. His understanding was so clear. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The seventh Imam is Kazim. Nobody could anger him. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. All together. The eighth Imam is Rida. He said to share with each other. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The tenth Imam is Naqi. His heart is filled with purity. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. 11th Imam is Askari. He spread goodness secretly. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. The 12th Imam is Wahdi. We're waiting for him eagerly. He spent his life guiding to Islam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. Salamu alayka ya Imam. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
MashaAllah. Can we recite 3 loud salawat for Ali for his protection, please? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. MashaAllah, well done, Ali. That took Ali a lot of practice. So he read it in English and Arabic. And mashallah, I bet you're very proud of Ali. And I'm sure our Imams and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are very proud of you, Ali. Well done. Keep up the good work. Okay? I want to hear more of that when we have celebrations. Inshallah. Brothers and sisters, are all your phones charged for ready for cahoots after the lecture? Inshallah. Can we welcome Sheikh Mohammed, who's going to give a lecture, as I said, about Shaytan. He will talk to us about Shaytan and inshallah educate us to control al-la'in. Could we welcome Shaykh with 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم العن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك اللهم العن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله اللهم العنهم جميعا ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد We are told in the holy month that the shaitan is chained up. Sometimes people may ask that if he's chained up, then how be it that people still commit sins? Once I saw someone ask a question. This was one of the YouTube videos. Someone asked one of the Mashaykh a question. And the answer he gave was particularly funny. He said, how is it that if the devil's chained up, that I can still commit sins? The Sheikh said, well, he's chained up. He's not hidden. He said, like a dog on a leash. They're on a chain. If you go rattle that chain or go near, the dog's still going to bite you. You know, if you still go into that field or you go in that direction, by all means it's there. But the answer to the question is this. The shaitan has no authority over you to begin with. The shaitan has no ability. That Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran that the guile of the shaitan is weak. Shaitan has no ability. All the shaitan does is call you. One man, and this is a story, it's been echoed for years in the Arabic manabir. I've never heard it mentioned on the English manbar for some reason. I never hear anyone use this story. For some reason it's fittingly an Arabic story about Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari. Radwanullahi ta'ala alayh. Sheikh Murtada was the marja that was the foremost. When I say foremost, he was the most known. Doesn't mean he was the only marja. There was no point where there was only one person that stood out as the marja. There was always plenty of fuqaha at the same time like there is today. And his marja'i stretched from the 18th century into the 19th century. So you would say the late 1700s into the early 1800s. One man living nearby Sheikh Murtada Ansari was living in Najaf. He saw a dream. And in the dream, he saw the shaitan. And he saw the shaitan with a chain. And this chain had been broken in 7 places. And the shaitan was mending the chain. A nice thick chain. So the man asked the shaitan in the dream. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, these are the instruments are used to lure people to commit sin. He said some people need a string. Shows him a string. Some people need a cord. Some people need a rope. Some need a thick rope. And then he asked him, who's this chain for? He said, this chain I used last night on Murtada al-Ansari, and 7 times he broke it. He said, what about me? What do you use for me? He said, you, I just use my finger. I usher you and you come along. Nastajiru billah. Sometimes this is the ability of the shaitan with people. And sometimes we think that we are immune, but we look at the people around us, the friends that we keep. They say, let's go to this place, this is haram. We say, yes. We don't even think about it. We just jump on board and go along with their journey wherever they are taking us. So he said, when I woke up, he said, I went to the house of Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari and I told him my dream. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Anyone that identifies as a kid under 4, could they please go upstairs for a class? So if you're a kid under 4, go upstairs for a class, huh? It says under 4. What? So kids between 4 and 12, go upstairs. So kids between the ages of 4 and 12, could they please go upstairs? You have a class there. Okay, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. All right. So when he went to visit Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari, and he said to him his dream, Sheikh Murtada said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. There is no power, there's no will or no power save in Allah, the Almighty. He said, last night I had some guests come to my house. This is his story. And when these guests came over, I did not have anything to give them as diyafa. You know, when you come over, you have guests, you have to host them, you have to give them something. He said, I had nothing. He said, all that I had was amana, that someone had left me, a trust, money someone had left with me. And they had given me instructions, listen to this, that I'm allowed to use this money. I'm allowed to borrow it and return it at a later date. It's not like it was forbidden. But he said, I don't want to use it because then I'd have to repay it. And if it's not necessary, I won't use it. He said, so I kept going back and forward to the room. And every time I'd go and I would return. So he said, and the amount of trips I took I eventually picked up the money. But when I picked up the money, he said 7 trips I took. That's the 7 breaks. When I picked up the money to go, he said, I thought to myself, Ya Murtada, you take this money and cannot pay it back. And this man, although he forgives you, you have inconvenienced him. Is it worth inconveniencing him? Not even a sin was enough for him to return. So I sit and think to myself, how does someone reach that point? How do I? How does poor me reach the point where something that is not even forbidden and not even looked down upon, scorned, becomes something that the shaitan has to even lure me to? Because he can't. He's given up with me when it comes to sin. How do I reach this point? Firstly, before we get to this, we must understand the presence of the shaitan. For those of the questions we get asked is, number one, why is the shaitan here? What's the presence? What's the purpose of the shaitan? But before we get to that question, we get asked, does the shaitan exist? Do we have evidence that the shaitan exists? I'll give you a quick proof that the shaitan exists. Sometimes you're sitting down and a bad thought comes into your head. As we say, La ala al-bail, wala al khatir. A thought that you go, what the hell, why am I thinking this? Where did this, it's just like someone put this in your head. Why would they put this thought in my head? This is the shaitan. This is evidence of the shaitan. Because how else in this physical world where we believe in everything to be subservient to the physical laws, where would this idea come from? Where would this thought come from that I've never had initially? I've never thought of initially. Where would it come from? And some of you might say, this is a thing people say, might be from subliminal messages that I gathered from places. What if I've never been anywhere? What if I'm living in an area with no technology? In the past, they had these messages. Without watching Disney movies and that, they had these messages into their heads. So where do these messages come from? This is evidence of the shaitan's existence. Secondly, when you talk, one of the premier examples of the existence of the devil is the atheist. The atheist will accept a position that he cannot prove. The atheist will say, I do not believe in God. And then you say, can you prove that God does not exist? They say, no. How can you accept a position that you cannot prove? The reason they do, they are lulled and lured by the shaitan, by the devil. The devil brings them in this direction. One of the people of this position was Ibn Abi al-Awja. Ibn Abi al-Awja was probably, if you look historically, he would have been the Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins of that era. That's who Ibn Abi al-Awja was. He would be one that would come and sit with the Imams, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he had despicable behavior. You know, when I say why I mention these people, because they're not like that. They're very insolent when they talk to people. He wasn't very respectful. Look at Richard Dawkins. He's very disrespectful. In fact, once Neil deGrasse Tyson said to him, if you had more respect when you spoke, and you spoke without using vulgar language, people would actually listen to what you might have. And then his response was, this is science. Either you accept it or you can, and you can fit in the expletive of what he said. That was Richard Dawkins' response to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was a premier astrophysicist, not just anybody. You know, another respected scientist who was responsible for ridding us of Pluto was the 9th planet. So if you look at this person and the manner in which he spoke, that's how Ibn Abi al-Awja used to speak. Very insolent, had a filthy tongue when he spoke to people. When he sat with Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, because previously he was a student of Hassan al-Basri. Hassan al-Basri, I don't need to tell you about how deviated he was. You research him, he's probably one of the biggest deviants at the time. However, Ibn Abi al-Awja was his student, and when he left Hassan al-Basri, he even became more deviated than Hassan al-Basri, to that point. Ibn Abi al-Awja got to the point where not only was he against religion, he was like your typical atheist. He was an angry atheist. He would come and fight the religious. If you notice, like honestly, if you were to one day, God forbid, if a person was to renounce God, you just go back and live in a farm and just enjoy the rest of your life for whatever life before the worms eat your eyeballs in your grave. That's it. You know, that's what's going to happen. You wouldn't get on the internet and waste the rest of your life trying to get people out of religion when there's no purpose and you're doing this. So Ibn Abi al-Awja, you know what he would do? He would, because there was no internet back then, he would come to Hajj and he would annoy the pilgrims. That's what he'd do. He'd sit there and look at these people, look at them worshipping this house of rocks with this rock within it, and they're running around like he says, when he mentions that they are like the ba'ir. Ba'ir is like the male camels. Like, look at the way that they run around. He would mock them and he would ridicule them. So one day, he sat with Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and he said this, look at the way you worship this house and you scurry like camels around it and you worship this house, and then whoever thinks about what you're doing will no doubt reach the point to say that you have no wisdom and no insight. And the Mu'assis, the one that created this path, is an unintelligent person. And when you say, all right, this is not intelligence, okay, I accept, my brother. Based on what? Now, this is one of the things where when an atheist wants to tell you underage marriage is bad, you say, all right, what is underage marriage? They say someone under the age of 18. I say, all right, what if I went to Portugal and married someone 15, where I'm allowed? Is that wrong? That's a Western country, or the majority of the states of the United States that have no legal age limit as long as the court approves it. Is that wrong? Do you know what I mean? So what is the foundation for you to make this law to begin with? First, if you get the age, what deems it wrong? What deems it wrong for me to say someone 10 years old cannot drive a car? If I say someone 10 years old cannot drive a car, what is the foundation I base this ruling on? So what is the basis that I'm placing the rules that I make? So for you to say these people are worshipping a house, scurrying around this house like camels, what is the basis of all this? So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says to him, إن من أضله الله وأعمى قلبه استوخم الحق ولم يستعذبه وصار الشيطان وليه وربه وقرينه يورده مناهل الهلكة. They said, whoever Allah deviates and blinds their heart. And when we say Allah deviates and blinds their heart, what does that mean? Whoever basically has turned away from God, Allah blinds their heart now because they have no guidance. When you turn away from God, it's like, imagine you're sitting in a room and there's a light and you just turn it and enter a dark room because the light comes from God. So if the light's not there, you're left in this darkness. What happens to this person? He says wasar. He says, before he gets to that, he says وَأَمَا قَلْبَهُ اسْتَوْخَمَ الْحَقِّ, that he finds the truth to be strenuous and difficult. So he becomes all technical for them. Why? He says وَلَمْ يَسْتَعْذِبْهُ, which means that they can't comprehend it. They can't fathom it anymore. You notice when we talk about hijab, whenever they see a woman wearing hijab, they say we should liberate this woman. And the woman says, I chose to wear hijab. No, sister, we hear you. You are in prison and we're here to help you. She says, but I chose to wear hijab. That's right, sister. That's what they've been telling you. But they won't even listen because they've set their thought process in the way that they think. Then he says, wasara shaytan. So when Allah Azza wa Jal has left you because you've left God, who have you taken as your commander? He says, wasara shaytan waliyahu. The shaitan has become his master, wa rabbahu, and his lord, wa qarinahu, and his associate, partner in everything. And he'll take him all the way until he perishes. And this is what the problem is with these atheists. When they turn away from God, instead they take the shaitan as their lord. They take a master in this manner. Unknowingly or knowingly, this is what happens. When I turn away from God, this is what I'm left with. Now, the problem is because I have not taken notice of the devil from the very beginning. That Allah Azza wa Jal said from the very beginning that I will let you know your manifest and open enemy is the shaitan. Do not associate with the shaitan. Do not follow the shaitan because he is your enemy. He does not wish you well at all. So the problem is in Shahr Ramadan, we get used to the fact that we're fasting, we're reading dua, we're reading Quran, we're attending majalis, we have this cover. After Shahr Ramadan, everything goes back to normal. It's like when you go to the Hajj and you're going from one place of sanctity to another consecrated place, and then suddenly when you leave Jeddah and you arrive in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or wherever you arrive, and then all of a sudden, wow, everything goes into full color. You start seeing what the world is again. And it comes like a shock to the system. After Shahr Ramadan, you get this similar shock. One of the things where people fail is they don't know their enemy and they underestimate their enemy. You look at everything. If you are complacent and if you don't take anybody seriously, it affects you. Take a look at yesterday, was it Manchester City, where they slept on Real Madrid, thinking we've done enough, we've won. Last moments, they ended them. You fall asleep just for a slight moment, and then you feel the wrath, and it comes in. The shaitan, if you sleep on him, he will take over you. How? The Imam says that upon the heart of every believer, there are shayateen, like there are flies above a piece of meat. You'll put a piece of meat outside and look at how many flies turn up. This is how the shayateen are around the believer, just to deviate them. That's why the believer the whole time, when they want to pray, we call the niche in the prayer, what do we call it? Mihrab. Why is it called mihrab? Because it's a place of harb. You are at war with the devil. Every time you're about to say Allahu Akbar, he says, where are your keys? Did you pack this up? Did you turn off the fridge? Is the car still on? Where are the kids? You're going to pick them up. Oh, you got football training this afternoon. Did you go to the gym? And you go, oh my God, how did I remember everything instantaneously? Because you got up to pray. So the shaitan, the second you get up to pray, he attacks you immediately with everything. So thus I have to know my enemy. And I cannot underestimate this enemy, as he has deviated so many before me. Before, when God advises you, people don't listen to advice. But before advice, we used to say, كانت النصيحة بجمل. There's a saying we say that to give someone advice before, because it's an old story where they get the moral from the proverb, that to give someone advice, it was worth a camel. You'd have to actually pay a camel. We say the value of a camel. How expensive is a camel? Most people can't afford to buy a camel. That's how much you had to pay to get advice. Now you give someone advice, they don't want to listen. When Allah Azza wa Jal advises them, they don't want to listen. You know something, when you sit with the righteous people, you sit with the ulama, if you sit with a faqih, a scholar, and you sit and you want to give them advice, do you think they sit and look at you and say, look at this guy, he wants to teach me something? They actually sit there and go, teach me. They want to learn. Because they've worked so hard on themselves and they've made themselves so humble. Because if they don't, that's how they slip. And you see the ones that slip. You've seen the ones. Doesn't mean if they're wearing the garb of a scholar, they're necessarily a scholar, But once that I don't have that character or that humility, I can slip. So it begins first with myself before I work on the devil. Number one, I need to know that I am vulnerable. I'm vulnerable. Why? Because there were people before me that fell. There are stories when we spoke. I mentioned a bit earlier in Shahr Ramadan. Before that, I spoke about Zubair, the cousin of Rasulullah, the son of Rasulullah's auntie. He slipped and fell. You think about Zubair, his sword that fought to defend Rasulullah in Uhud. He stands in defending Fatima alayhi salam. All this, he sold it in the last moment. If Zubair can fall, I can fall. Bal'am Ba'ura, who some narrations say had Ismullah al-A'zam, fell, I can fall. How many stories do you hear of people that were on the righteous path and they turned? They saw the dunya and they went with the dunya. So I've got to be true to myself. Where Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zayn al-Abidin in Dua Arafah, where he mentions in the dua, he says, وَأَنَا بَعْدُ أَقَلُّ الْأَقَلِّينَ وَمِثْلَ الذَّرَّةِ أَوْ دُونَهَا. He says, أَنَا بَعْدُ أَقَلُّ الْأَقَلِّينَ وَأَذَلُّ الْأَذَلِّينَ وَمِثْلَ الذَّرَّةِ أَوْ دُونَهَا. Imam is he's teaching us how to recite. He's saying this to Allah, I am the least of the least. I'm the most humble of the most humble. Yani in front of Allah Azza wa Jal, how do I even raise my head? He says, I am like a speck. No, he says, I'm less than a speck. I have to be in that stance. So know that I'm vulnerable. Not those people that sit there and say, Wallah, I've done a lot, I'm going to enter paradise. Oh Allah, you know, have you ever seen when someone reads the majlis at the end, what do they say? Allahumma taqabbal minna hadal qaleel. They specify, oh Allah, accept this little from us. And they should be meaning this because it is nothing. We expect what? You know, you've been reading all these nights. How many of you read Dua Abi Hamza Thamali? Dua Abi Hamza Thamali. He says, وَقَدْ عَلِمْنَا مَا نَسْتَوْجِبُ بِأَعْمَالِنَا. We know what we deserve for our actions. We know what we are worthy of. This is the position. Know what you are worthy of. And that's why the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam would say, رَبِّ لَا تَكِلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ أَبَدًا. Do not place my affairs in my hands ever. Always know that you are vulnerable and you need Allah Azza wa Jal. That's the first thing that you need to understand. Secondly, we know that we have been warned about this, and if we don't pay attention, we will fall. So how does the devil work? We mentioned already the whisper of the devil. One, the whisper, he mentions that he says in the hadith, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, احذروا عدوا نفذ في الصدور خفية. نفذ في الصدور خفية. He covertly penetrates the hearts. I say the heart, we're not talking about the physical heart, the soul. And then he says, وَنَفَثَ فِي الْآذَانِ نَجِيًّا. And he secretly whispers into your ears. You know, sometimes you have a problem. I swear, I'm dealing with a problem. I'm so close to solving it. You think you're so close to solving it, and then Iblis pushes it into third gear and says, I'm taking this one. And he'll push it. I've seen this once when I was a child. I was about 5 years old. I remember this incident. I always ask my father what happened on that day. I said, when I was a child, I saw you run past me, and you were running outside. And this was when we were living on Wollongong Road in Arncliffe. He ran down the stairs. I remember his turban fell off his head and it rolled on Wollongong Road. And I saw him, he hit someone. And I said, what happened that day? He said, 2 men had a fight and I was solving it. He said they shook hands and kissed. When they got down, he said one of them was pulling a knife out of his back pocket. And he said, he grabbed him at the time and he hit him to take the knife. He was going to stab the guy. It had to do with tribal mentality. But the thing is, they had solved it, but then as he would have been going down, the devil said, ضحك عليك الشيخ. You know, he made you look like he's making a mockery of you. Your haqq has been taken. You're not even a man. You're not even half a man. And the guy said, yeah, I'm not a man. I'll show you I'm a man. The whole time he's having a dialogue with the shaitan. Shaitan says, I got this guy. Keep going. That's what happens. You know, when someone, you tell them, you know, let this go. He says, yeah, I'll let it go. You know, Allah says to be forgiving. And then the devil will start whispering. So what do you mean? They're just tricking you because they want to take you. They think you're a fool. They actually think you're a fool. And you say, you know what? Am I a fool? No, this can't be possible. This is where the devil enters. Those little whispers that come in the last second when you are so close to solving something and then suddenly it explodes. Becomes something far greater. Once, and this is a story, this story is mind-boggling. Why? The first time I heard this story, and I've heard it from several fuqaha. When I say fuqaha, we're talking about jurists, ulama. You're talking about mujtahideen and maraja. When I heard this story, the first time it blew my mind because I couldn't comprehend that this story would take place. This story took place between the First and the Second World War. It would have been the 1930s. when the marja of in Najaf, at that time would have been the same time, there were two big maraja. One was in Qom al-Muqaddasa, Agha Hussein al-Burujurdi, and the other was Sayyid Abu al-Hasan al-Isfahani in that era. Rahmatullah alayhima. They say Sayyid Abu al-Hasan had solved a problem between two tribes that were at each other's throats. When he solved it, one member of one group of one of the tribes said, we didn't get our thar, we didn't get our revenge properly. And the reason for this is that man, Sayyid Hassan, Abu Hassan. They said, we're going to take our revenge from him. So they went to where he would pray, in Haram Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, where he would lead the prayer. While he was praying, his son was in one of the front lines. One of them stood behind his son. As he got up, he grabbed him, ripped him back, and he slit his throat. There's a story that he slit his throat and killed him. So when there was a commotion, they grabbed him and they brought him towards the Sayyid. And these people that are telling you these stories, some of them were people that were around at that time. Although they may not have been witness, but the story had spread, and the people that were there, it was a story that was known. When they grabbed them and they brought him, the killer, towards the Sayyid asked him, how could you kill my son? You killed my son, and people that have children understand this position. And the man said, it was you that stopped us from getting our thar, our revenge. So we took your son's life instead. And this is the hard part. You want to end this, or this bloodshed's going to continue. So the Sayyid said, has this satisfied your thar? Is this enough for your thar, your revenge that you have in your tribal mentality? And they said, yes. So he said, let's leave it at that. We'll end it there. This is something that blows your mind. That he would dare at this point, that's it. Because of his position and his station, he could not let this blow out and become a bigger problem. For the Shaitan, this would have been a great moment to let it all blow out of proportion. You know, when people talk about Sayyid Abu Hassan al-Isfahani, they say if his character was a drop in the ocean, if it was even a drop in the ocean of the character of Ahlul Bayt alayhum as-salam, imagine what Ahlul Bayt were like. But I can give you an example of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, every time one of his companions was killed, he didn't stop calling the enemy back to paradise. Did he ever stop doing da'wah to them? Even after companions and family were killed, he kept calling them and say, turn back to Allah. This is the example that they learn from, not allowing the devil to get between the Muslims and get between their affairs. So I need to understand the way Shaitan deals with people in this manner. Now, if we look I want to choose another narration that will be apparent. The Amir al-Mu'mineen says about the way that the devil works. He says in his hadith, "Ash-shaytanu muwakkalun bih," that the shaitan takes charge of the servant. Once someone is around, the shaitan's always around you trying to break in. But how is he wants to take charge of this person. How does he enter? He says, يُزَيِّنُ لَهُ الْمَعْصِيَةِ لِيَرْكَبَهَا. First thing the shaitan does is he glamorizes the sin. How? How does the shaitan glamorize the sin for us to commit it? Firstly, we do this job good enough. Number one, how often do we talk about victims and how often do we talk about the actual criminal? Do you know the only time we mention a victim's name is when the victim's an actual criminal? Did you know that? If we mention a killer, we mention the actual killer. They never, even when they make a television show, they'll make it about the killer and they glamorize the killer. They glamorize the criminal. If you look at the world you're watching today, all the television shows in the last 2 decades, the protagonist is a criminal and the people are cheering them on. There's been that many shows. One television show that was about a serial killer, and he was the protagonist, and people used to actually watch the show and enjoy it. The fact that the hero of the show was a serial killer. Even all these new shows where they show you, especially like superheroes, a lot of them are really vigilantes. They're people that decide that they're going to punish people themselves, as if they are God's representatives upon the earth. So firstly, he glamorizes it. What's another way he does it? He makes it excusable. I could be out living in the country or living out in Whoop Whoop, and I get hungry. And I go to eat, there's nothing available, and I see a McDonald's. And I say, look, I'm hungry, there's no halal meat anywhere nearby. I start to, and that's not me, that's the devil telling you, you know what, you're hungry. Does God want you to die of starvation? Even though there's a service station where you can buy sliced bread and cheese. No. You know, I'm going to go in there, this is my intention. Or if, for example, with the youth, the young boys, when they're at school and that, they say, hold on, you know, I can't get married, I'm too young, let me commit a sin. Let me go in this direction. And they start to, what do they start to do? Legitimize what they're about to do. It's like a criminal that takes advantage of someone. He says, oh, look at the way she's dressed, you know. What do? Is they legitimize what they're doing. This is how the devil does it. He makes the sin look legitimate. The other thing the Imam says, he says, وَيُمَنِّيهِ التَّوْبَةَ لِيُسَوِّفَهَا. The second thing the devil does is he makes you, what? Have hope for what? It's a false hope for forgiveness in God. Okay? He says, do it now, Allah forgives. Allah Ghafurur Rahim. Do it now, Allah will forgive you. And every time you want to do tawbah, he says, not yet. Have you seen those people? They tell you, I'm not going to get forgiven. I'm going to go to Hajj when I'm older. I want to commit as much as I want, enjoy my life, so you're certain that you're going to live till you go to Hajj. And they prolong the Hajj. You ask them to do something, you see these young women, you tell them wear hijab, they say, I'll wear hijab when I'm older. Well, the whole idea is for you to wear hijab when you're younger, so you can prevent the onlookers and prevent sin from taking place. Don't wear it when you're too old and no one really cares by that age. So what age? I'm going to put it on when I'm 80 years old. When am I going to put the hijab on? Well, there's going to be no effect. And the shaitan says to you, delay it. Delay it. Because Allah is forgiving. But this is the problem. If I delay things to the very end, am I certain that God will forgive me? He will. To the last breath, we have hadith that He will forgive me. But am I certain that at the very end I will ask for that forgiveness? Or will I be like Zubair, that got stabbed in his neck while he was asleep on his stomach after he sold out Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Or Talha, that got stabbed in his buttock by Marwan ibn al-Hakam from behind during battle and lost everything. How am I going to end up? Do I know that last moment? Because you know when people say the last moment people turn, yes. Count the number of people that turned in Karbala. Out of the army of 30, 40,000 or up to 70,000, whatever it was Al-Hur and his son and his servant. And you do the math there. If you're going to say there was 30,000 people and 3 people turned back, that's 1 in 10,000 that turned back. Some narrations say there was 70,000. Some say there was 1,000, 1 million. Some say the army was from Karbala all the way to Kufa. And there's a lot of narration. I'm giving you the minimum. The minimum amount they say is 30,000 of the enemy. So if that 1 in 10,000 will turn back, how do I guarantee I'm one of those 10,000 if I take that slip road? Okay, finally, and I'm really sorry, how do I get immunity against the shaitan? Al-Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, أكثر الدعاء تسلم من سورة الشيطان. عفوا من سورة الشيطان. أكثر الدعاء تسلم من سورة الشيطان. Increase the amount of dua. You know, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Do dua. A lot of dua. He says, the Imam says, you'll be secure. من سورة الشيطان means the force of the devil, the strength and the might of the devil. You'll be secure from it. Whatever it is, you are secure because you do dua. You know, when we pray, a lot of times people don't even ask Allah for anything. You know? We don't say, for example, I think in dua al-thulatha, وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ شَرِّ الشَّيْطَانِ الَّذِي يَزِيدُنِي ذَنْبًا إِلَى ذَنْبِي. To ask Allah Azza wa Jal for His protection. When we read Surah Al-Nas, Surah Al-Nas, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. When we read that surah, ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. This surah to get protection of Allah from the shaitan. So I need to do this. Finally, and this is what I'll finish off with, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, تحرز من إبليس بالخوف الصادق. This is your best protection. Dread. To have true fear. To actually fear that I might not turn back at the last second. You know, if we look at a lot of the people tend to look at the greater sins. The first sin we think of is what? Ash-shirku billah. That's the greatest sin. But there are sins that people forget. And I'm not talking about al-ya'as wal-qunut, despair and being despondent. I'm talking about al-aman min makrillah. For you to actually think you are safe from the punishment or the wrath of God. To think it doesn't apply to me. Remember I told you a story about the guy that told the people, he was giving a speech to his friends. And he said to them, my taqwa is so high. He said, I go to Bondi Beach. This is actually a true thing. That's what I'm saying. He says, I can go to Bondi Beach and I can look and it don't get affected by anything I see. I said he must be a eunuch. But anyway, you know, whatever that is, if you want to look it up. But anyway, the only way that this person would have an idea like this because he has aman min makrillah. He actually believes that there's no effect on him. That there's no trial, there's no punishment. That everyone, if they put themselves in the position of trial and they want to be put in trial, they'll fall. Otherwise, we always ask Allah Azza wa Jal for His protection in this. And that's what I should be afraid of. In fact, I should be petrified that there is that possibility that I can fall and I will fall apart. So firstly, I need to know who I'm dealing with. I need to know the way that Iblis works. That I'm dealing with Shaitan, who is my enemy. The way that he works is he glamorizes the sin so I can do it. And then he gives me the false hope of forgiveness so I can go along with it. Allah Ghafur Rahim, I'll do what I want. But I also remember the way against him is through dua and through what else? Through having dread, real fear of the possibility that in my last moments I will not turn back to God. Obviously, it's a day of celebration. These are times of celebration that we are together and we see it. But the real meanings I've always said of Eid is the return to God. It's the fact we are clean right now. Inshallah, whoever managed to keep the Nur, God bless you. of Shahr Ramadan. Whoever lost it, you know, you still have time. You still have in these days to still turn to Allah. Allah Azza wa Jal, after His rahmah, you can always come back. You know, when people go ziyarah, when people go hajj, after they return, Allah gives them like a barrier where if they do something wrong, they can always come back there and then. So to keep that nur, so you don't lose it, inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jal grants us the opportunity to go to His to pilgrimage to His holy house. We ask Allah to grant us the opportunity to visit the grave of His messenger and the Imma in Baqiyah alayhum as-salam. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to save our necks from the fire of hell, and we ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi. أرواحنا فداه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم قل لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. والأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والأرواح موتانا وموتاكم ولقبول الأعمال وقضاء الحوائج وشفاء المرضى وغفران الذنوب وتعجيل الفرج وحسن العاقبة. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.